things might not have ended quite as well in that situation. What's the blueprint for updating a supercar? Usually, it's very simple. You take what you already have and add a few minor elements to take things up a notch. You crank up the engine to make more power, add some incremental performance, increase the price tag, and more often than not, that's enough to call it a day. But if you're McLaren, that simple approach isn't really in your DNA. If you're McLaren, updating your supercar normally means an opportunity to finesse almost everything. You don't take incremental steps. You throw the entire book at it. This is the Artura Spider, a new body style for McLaren's entry-level supercar. At first glance, it looks as if it adheres to the basic principles of upgrading a product you already have. But look below the surface and you'll see that this is a car that's pretty much been reinvented. First things first, we got more power. It's still a hybrid system. It's still the 3-litre, 120-degree V6 with an e-motor bolted on, but instead of making 680 PS, power is up. McLaren's first port of call was to tinker with the power unit, so we now get an extra 20 PS for total output of 700 metric horsepower. Torque remains a healthy 720 Newton meters. And all of that tinkering means that performance is up. 0 to 62 is now done in 3 seconds flat. 0 to 124, 8.4 seconds. And you'll be doing 186 miles an hour in just over 21 and a half. Flat out, 205. Yep, it's pretty speedy. It's about as speedy as the coupe, which by the way will also benefit from a power upgrade to 700 PS if you buy it new or if you take your old one to a dealership. But curiously, it's the Spider that will end up being the most popular version of the Artura from a sales perspective. And there is a good reason for that. The Artura Spider is, to me, the coolest version of the Artura by far, and it packs so many enhancements over the coupe that we first saw. Chiefly, a brand new retractable hardtop that can be opened or closed at speeds of up to 31 miles an hour and in as little as 11 seconds. Plus, you can even do it using the key. What a flex. Most car companies would take a chainsaw to the roof and replace it with some fabric, but not McLaren, clearly. Their roof features 8 electric motors, so it's whisper quiet and smooth, opening the car up to the elements and indeed the sound in a way the coupe never could. The rear deck looks absolutely fantastic, doesn't it? But it's not all about looking cool. There's method to the madness going on back here. Normally, taking the roof off a coupe and turning it into a convertible is very simple, but because the Artura is mid-engined and it has a very unique powertrain chimney, a cooling solution back here, well, they've had to get very creative with how to accommodate the retractable hardtop. They've moved the powertrain chimney backwards by 200 millimeters to make it fit, and then they had to figure out a way to make everything stay cool. So what you have now is an assortment of vents and ducts all over that deck lid. First of all, these ribbed sections here fire cool air into the muffler, keeping that cool. And then on the left and the right-hand side, you've got these twin ducts, which do a couple of different things. 2/3 of the air captured by both of these fire cool air into the transmission, and 1/3 from the one on the left-hand side gets funneled up to cool the engine, and 1/3 from the one on the right-hand side gets channeled in an S-duct to escape from this lower vent back here to form an area of cool air against your paintwork to stop it melting from the 200-degree heat that escapes from that powertrain chimney. On top of that, quite literally, you've now got these flying buttresses, which are now transparent and look amazing, by the way, that have vents inside, capturing yet more cool air and then channeling it through this little escape duct there over the top of the hot air to give you a kind of hot air sandwich. It's very complicated, but it looks incredibly cool. So what other changes have they made for the introduction of the Artura Spider? Well, the interior hasn't really moved forward very much, but there are a couple of interesting little tweaks. First of all, we now get an orange power button instead of red, so it matches the exterior of the car and of course matches McLaren's brand colors. We also get a new instrument pinnacle with the shortcut buttons for adjusting the chassis and the powertrain literally at your fingertips. They call it the hot ass concept, not me. Literally, it stands for hands on throttle and steering. You haven't got to take your hands off anything to make the adjustments you need. Quite clever. The car's also got an upgraded stereo system, which is actually better than the one you get in the coupe. It's made by Bowers & Wilkins, and the speakers have been moved a lot closer to your head, and they've actually installed another rear speaker just here in the bulkhead, and the thing sounds brilliant. It is quite possibly the best sounding speaker system in any supercar I've driven. Big talk, but yeah, brilliant sounding system.
The exhaust is supposed to sound amazing too, improved by including a new tuned resonator and reshaped exhaust pipes with active valves. There's also a symposer, a membrane that takes the air pressure from the exhaust, amplifying it through the bulkhead so it sounds louder in the cabin. The reality is that it sounds okay rather than outstanding, certainly weaker than the pipes on the 750S.
The list of upgrades goes on. We've still got an 8-speed seamless shift dual clutch gearbox, but it's now apparently 25% faster than it was before. They've done that by giving it what they call a pre-filled system. They pressurize the hydraulic fluid in the gearbox to the kiss point so that when you change gear, the system is effectively a lot more ready to change up. Apparently it's a very difficult thing to pull off and needs fancy algorithms. Did we need a faster gearbox in the Artura? No. Do we have one anyway? Yes. Thank you. The end result of those gearbox changes maybe aren't that impressive though. I'm a man that likes the gearbox to slap when you change gears, and this, yeah, it doesn't really slap. It's a little too smooth for my tastes.
I would have traded some smoothness for drama. But speaking of smoothness, they've tried to dial that back somewhat with stiffer powertrain mounts that allow you to feel more of what the engine is doing. Those mounts also stop the engine sloshing around, even by fractions, resulting in a more cohesive feel when turning especially. And they've upgraded the damper valves and the in-car Ethernet network that speaks to the dampers, improving their response rates by up to 90%, so they react more quickly to the road and the driver.
I love the lightness of this car. That's the main thing about the Artura, isn't it? In fact, that's the main thing about McLarens in general. They are so much lighter than the competition. This one's 1,457 kilograms dry, which makes it around 63 kilograms heavier than the coupe, but it's still around 83 kilograms lighter than its main rivals. If you want to get an idea of what that kind of weight reduction feels like, have a think about your own car and what it feels like when you're carrying an 83 kilogram passenger, for example. You can tell the difference. The suspension suffers, the handling suffers, and it feels not quite as alive and as dynamic. That is the advantage that the Artura has baked in by default. It feels bloody brilliant, and it is very fast. I mean, it doesn't hit you in the head with the power and torque in the way that an electric car might. It kind of builds gradually as you go up through the revs. But I think that's actually so rewarding. You don't get everything dumped on you in one go. You kind of got to earn it, and it is, yeah, I mean, it's supercar quick, as you'd expect. It's a wonderful thing. If I was being really judgmental, I'd say it doesn't feel quite as savage in a straight line as a Ferrari 296 GTB. The steering is definitely one of the best things about this car. McLaren are persisting with a hydraulic steering rack rather than the electrically assisted systems that a lot of its rivals use. And it really pays dividends, because when you turn in this car, it feels like a sports car should feel. It's consistent, it's accurate, and there's so much feedback coming off that front axle. You're so connected to the road. A lot of sports cars can feel slightly aloof or terrifying in the worst cases when you're in the corners because you can't feel the grip. But in this, you feel everything. It's wonderful. And I'm a big fan of these brakes. You got to give it quite a solid push
to get them to start slowing the car down, but they are so consistent and the feel is fantastic. It's a proper driver's car, this thing. And now the fact that we got no roof means you feel a lot more connected to your surroundings. It's just hilarious and engaging and brilliant and fast and fun. And then on top of all that, there's the beauty of it being a plug-in hybrid. So you can go nuts 1 minute, but then dial things back to become really, really chilled. I can put it in comfort and the valves and the exhaust close up, or I can put it in electric and suddenly I've got an electric car. Look at this, I'm not using any fuel whatsoever now. I'm being driven by electrons. You can drive this car in electric only mode at motorway speeds. You can drive it for up to 23 kilometers and you can feel nice and smug that you're saving the planet with your plug-in hybrid supercar. Anyway, enough of that. Sport mode, let's go.
So the extensive list of changes to the Artura Spider is commendable, but nothing is ever perfect, of course. There are things that annoy me. First of all, the price. £225,000 is a lot of money and puts it slightly too close to the more powerful Ferrari 296 GTB. The interior isn't quite as special as you'd expect from a car at this price, and the exhaust, although improved, could be better. And then there's reliability, which is still a concern for McLaren. Hey guys, it's a couple of days after the Artura Spider launch. I'm now at home in a Jaguar, and I wanted to talk to you about reliability. It's a subject that people often discuss when it comes to McLaren, and I've been quite lucky so far. I've never had a problem with pretty much any McLaren I've ever driven, and I've driven dozens, but I did have an incident with the Artura Spider whilst on the launch, which I think is very much worth talking about. So during the filming, I'd finished all my talking and I was getting a few more shots and I was accelerating, and then the car, upon trying to change gear, decided to lose all power. So literally no response from the throttle whatsoever. Luckily, I was on a hill, so I was able to continue coasting down that hill. There was a van coming up quite quickly behind me, so luckily it didn't come to a stop and have an interfacing with the back of the McLaren. Gravity took care of me and I managed to coast about a mile down the hill to the safety of a lay-by. And when I got there, I turned the car off and then on again, and then the issue disappeared almost completely. Not 100% completely, because it seemed to go into a kind of limp mode. It didn't give me the same performance that it was giving me before the issue. Eventually, that limp mode sorted itself out and the car was absolutely fine again. But it does bear the question, what would have happened if the car lost all acceleration and response from your accelerator pedal if I was somewhere else? For example, in the third lane of a motorway. Things might not have ended quite as well in that situation. Now, I did talk to McLaren because I wanted to give them the right of reply. And first of all, they say that they were sorry that it happened to me, which is nice, thank you. And that they diagnosed the car after my issue, and the systems recorded that the car protected itself against an unexpected operation or action. Their engineers believe that powertrain protection activated due to a gear shift request simultaneous with the 8,500 RPM limiter being clipped under heavy acceleration. What does that mean? It basically means I was accelerating heavily towards the red line, and as I reached that red line, I requested a gear shift. And the car didn't like it for some reason, so it kind of shut down the powertrain and limited accepting inputs from me in order to protect itself. Interesting. They say it's not an issue they've encountered in the past, but they will run further tests to see if they can recreate what happened to me in order to ensure that it doesn't happen again in the future. That's what they say. What do I say? I say accelerating hard towards the red line and changing up is the minimum requirement you'd expect from your supercar costing £250,000, or any car for that matter. But it's good that McLaren are looking into the issue, and hopefully they'll give me a response, which I'll leave in a comment on this video. Now, I do have a verdict on this car, and I'm going to play it to you as I recorded it on the day. I'm not changing that verdict because in terms of the way the car drives and feels, I think that's still valid. But do bear in mind the reliability incident that I had. But that notwithstanding, here's my final verdict on the Artura Spider. So what do we think of the McLaren Artura Spider? Well, you got to rate McLaren. I mean, they've tinkered and they've fussed and they've fettled and they've tried to improve pretty much every single aspect of this car. And ultimately, what they've done is deliver a slightly better Artura. But then I suppose, what did we expect? They were going for evolution rather than revolution. But having said that, the upgrades are very, very welcome. They've turned what was already a very good super sports car into an extremely good super sports car. The Artura Spider, it's my cup of tea.